Here.
Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. James.
Present.
Ms. McBride. Here. Mr. Marpat. Mr. Scholl.
Present.
Mr. Colvin.
Here.
Mr. Tripp.
Here.
Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Witten.
Present.
Mr. Cruz.
Here.
Mr. McLaren.
Present.
And we do have one signed up for public comment. Mr. Carlson, if you would, use the mic in the back.
Good morning. I understand that we are here today to discuss the delegation agreement. I'm too young to understand the specifics of this agreement, but I do know that we had the money to finance an inspector who was reliable and got the job done. It seemed the conditions at Joyce Farms were improving, but then suddenly the money was gone and so was our great inspector. No inspector, no matter how qualified, can do their job properly by inspecting an area in Essex from Des Plaines. It seems that ever since we lost our competent inspector, the once improving conditions are getting worse. I'm sure all of you have been enjoying the nice summer we've been having, probably saving money on air conditioning and opening up all of your windows. Well, we would like to do that too, but we can't due to the stench of Joyce Farms. When my brother and I get older, and we reminisce about our childhood, we will have memories of running through the grass, riding horses, and swimming in the pool. Unfortunately, we will also remember how difficult it was to do these activities due to the unbearable swarms of flies and rotten smell of Joyce Farms. Just yesterday, my dad took the day off work to spend time with my mom on their anniversary. They plan on sitting on the porch, opening the windows, and enjoying the beautiful day. This idea was short-lived due to, once again, Joyce Farms. The sick, rotten smell drove them inside and forced them to shut the windows. How many tax-paying citizens have to complain before something gets done? Who in this county cares enough about the public to ensure that the environmental laws are followed? And who in this county is responsible for enforcing these laws? On my family's behalf, I'd like to say thanks, Joyce Farms. Thank you, Kankakee County, for ridding us of an inspector who could have prevented this problem. Thank you.
That's all of the public comment. We'll go on to the approval of the minutes. I have a motion to approve made by Mr. Witten, seconded by Mr. Washington. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Subdivision, the update of the ordinance. I have to leave
In your packets, you should find a packet like this. It's changes to the subdivision ordinance. Things that are grayed out are new items being added. Things that have strikes through them are items that are being removed. Over the course of the last year, the staff and the Land Use Transportation Committee of the Regional Planning Commission has been reviewing and updating this document to bring it a little more into to modernize it. Why are we doing this? The last major revision of the subdivision ordinance was in 1997, and since that time we've passed many other ordinances recommending changes to the subdivision ordinance that are just now being implemented. The stormwater and erosion control ordinance, some recommendations from the new comprehensive plan, the Greenways and Trails plan that was adopted in 1999, and an impact fee ordinance. So far in the approval process, this document's been reviewed and recommended by the Land Use and Transportation Subcommittee of the RPC. The Highway Department, the State's Attorney's Office have both reviewed it, and it's been reviewed and recommended by the full Regional Planning Commission. What's up next is the review and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Committee and adoption by the County Board. Some of the amendments, we're going to highlight some of those. Inspections of subdivisions. Currently, there is no formal guidelines in the subdivision ordinance for the inspection of subdivisions. On pages 8 through 10 of the new document, we've addressed that, and we've clarified who maintains or who does inspections and at what points in time they need to be done. We also clarified who maintains the improvements prior to final inspection, which would be the developer. We've also added the language referring to the dedication of school site impact fee ordinance that the county adopted. We've created a section for a special service area called we also refer to those as SSAs. What this is a taxing district for a special service area that would sit dormant. It'd be created prior to the creation of the subdivision, and it would sit dormant until it would need to be enacted to fix any improvements or make any repairs that the homeowners association fails to do. We've also added notice for subdivision so that the surrounding property owners are notified prior to a subdivision being built. I'm on page 6 of the, actually this is,
Page 2.
I have a different, I have a different set than you do, Mike.
Page 2.
Page 2. Well, you're on the flip chart. I don't keep up with the other one. You were down. That's fine what you got there.
All right. We've changed the process. We've removed the sketch plan phase. We've determined that that is pretty much unnecessary. It didn't have a lot of use in the beginning. The sketch plan phase was where we sat down with the developers and they brought in just a sketch of what they planned to do. It didn't do us a lot of good, so we've eliminated that phase. We made a lot of changes to the preliminary plat phase. We scaled it down to only include the preliminary plat and the supporting documentation for it. Currently, the preliminary plat stage requires all of the engineering to be finalized and done. We've moved that farther down the process line. And of course, the preliminary plat phase is reviewed by all the agencies. We've added the final engineering and specification phase. That moves all of the final construction documents to its own phase of the process. And this phase is only reviewed by the technical people, the planning department, highway department, township, municipal highway departments, and the county's independent engineer. And we've made some changes to the final plat phase. We've changed the fee structure. We added fee structure for the independent engineer. Actually, that is already part of the subdivision ordinance. It was adopted, I think, back in November, but it's also included in here. That helps offset the cost of the county hiring an independent engineer to review the plans. We've increased the fees for subdivisions. Currently, subdivision fees are $600 per subdivision plus $20 per lot. We've doubled those to $1,200 per subdivision and $40 per lot. We did a comparison with surrounding counties and other counties in Illinois and found that we are extremely low in the fees that we're charging. We've also increased the fees for minor subdivisions. We've doubled those. They've gone from $250 to $500. And we've created a fee for the vacation of plats. Currently, there is no fee for that. We worked with the GIS department to get language that to require all final plats to be filed digitally as well as on paper. This will save the county money when adding new subdivisions to the GIS system. We put in language for the homeowners association and language that requires homeowners associations to be established, and it sets forth items that needs to include. We've added a procedure for requesting a variance. Currently, there is no formal procedure for requesting a variance. And we've added a procedure for vacation of plans, or vacation of plats. We do not have anything formally for the procedure of plats, or for the procedure for the vacation of plats. We've added a construction guarantee. This replaces the letter of credit bond requirements. It's very similar to what's there now. Basically, we're calling it a construction guarantee. If you look on page 20, it outlines all of the items that have to be done to get the guarantee and what has to be done before the guarantee will be released. Currently, our ordinance just requires that a letter of credit or bond be supplied by the developer prior to the acceptance of the final plat. We are also requiring as-built plans now. Once the subdivision is developed, First they tell us what they're going to build, now we want them to tell us where they actually build. So there'll be a set of as-built plans as part of the process. And we've also added a subdivision warranty. Once the subdivision is finally accepted and everything is fine and everybody signed off on it, the developer still needs to give us a warranty for 25% of the value of the improvements as a warranty against anything that goes wrong with those improvements, from faulty materials or workmanship, for a period of 2 years. If nothing has to be done within those 2 years, they get their warranty as well.
Bill, questions in this discussion?
Yeah, I can take them as we go.
If you want to take them as you go, yeah. Mr. James?
Thank you. When you mention a 25% fee, that's money up front or just a signed on?
That's not a fee, it's a letter of credit or a bond.
Okay. And it covers what, improvements or actually the land itself?
It warranties the improvements for faulty material or workmanship, which means
And we're talking about to the land, we're not talking about to the houses or to the condos?
to the subdivision. The
To the subdivision,
improvements,
the
roads,
the real-
stormwater,
Correct, okay.
utilities that fall under our jurisdiction.
Because I was going to say, if I develop a subdivision, I had 10 builders come in, I don't want to be liable.
No,
for
if
their
a road
fee.
fails, if we get a pothole in a road, it would cover that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
That type of thing. Design standards. We added some language in there about easements that came from the Greenways and Trails Plan. We now add, we have provisions to allow for conservation easements. And those trail easements can be part of the open space requirements. As you know, all subdivisions are required to donate open space. Well, now the trails and trail easements, conservation easements can be part of that. We've changed the minimum pavement widths for streets, and currently your pavement widths and the design structure is based on whether it's an urban subdivision or a rural subdivision. Rural subdivisions have a 20-foot pavement width with ditches. Or an urban subdivision has a 30-foot pavement width with curb and gutter. Now we've changed that, and it's like I said, it's based on zoning. R1, R2, and RE lots bigger than 1 acre will have a rural cross-section with 20 foot of pavement, which would be the same as our rural subdivisions now. R1 and R2 lots with less than 1 acre but greater than 15,000 square feet lots, or commercial or industrial subdivisions over 2 acres, can have a semi-rural cross-section. That's a 28-foot pavement, 20 feet duct driving, 4-foot paved shoulders, and the stormwater would be a combination of ditch and pipe. You'd have a stormwater pipe to carry the major flow, and then you'd have a very shallow ditch on the side of the road to carry the minor runoff. Anything less than 15,000 square feet or commercial or industrial less than 2 acres would have an urban cross-section, which would be 28-foot pavement plus curb, gutter, and sidewalks on both sides. Our sidewalk requirements have increased from 4-foot to 5-foot widths, and that was recommended by the engineers. Open space. We've changed some of the requirements for open space. Most of this is to implement our Greenways and Trails plan. We require developers to donate land for designated trails first as part of the open space, which means that the Greenways and Trails plan calls for a trail to run through or along that property, that needs to be part of the open space plan for that property prior to any other open space donations. We remove retention and detention land as part of the required open space donation, which means the stormwater structures can no longer be utilized as part of the open space donation. All open space donations would be above and beyond that. Require that land donation for parks be adjacent to other parks if possible and where available. And we allow cash donation in lieu of land donations on rare cases, which means that you've got a small subdivision surrounded by larger subdivisions that already have public parks. That subdivision may not need to actually create a park, but they could donate land to the park district to maintain the parks that are already there.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Bill, just a question then. So they can use these greenways and these trails then as part of their, they would be part of their open space? So in other words, instead of having like a 5-acre park, they could have like a, maybe a 3.5-acre park
Yes.
and use the
Well, I mean,
trailways?
plus the trail, whatever land you can trail too. If the ordinance requires that you donate a 5-acre park, you still need to donate 5 acres.
Plus the trail?
But no, the trail is included as part of that.
Trail, okay, because I'm thinking, I think it's good to have the trails there, but I'm just, I think it's good to have a minimum open space, just psychologically speaking. I mean, the trails are good, but if we reduce that open space and have more trails, it's not really open space, you know, volume-wise.
Well, this was written to help promote our greenways and trails plan. Like I said, if we designated that a trail should be running alongside the property to go from point A to point B, we want the developer of this subdivision to build his part of it.
Right, and I understand, I think that's a good idea, but I think, you know, I hate to see a park shrink in size. A commons area that, you know, families can enjoy, that's the one thing I'm hesitant about. And then when you go to some areas where they've had trails or those little alleyways in between, people start getting very, and I think that they're a great idea, but then people start getting hesitant, and I would want to see something come along to block those for whatever reasons people may have.
That can be done during the preliminary plat stage. I mean, right now, even though we may require 5 acres of ground for parkland, we don't have any specifics as to the configuration of that. So they could put it into small 1-acre parcels, or they could do it in little trail strips. You know, I mean, you get to say or to approve that at the preliminary plat stage. If you don't like the way they designed the park, then you can, you know, you can speak your mind in that.
All right, thank you.
We removed the storm.
I have a question on the, right after independent engineer selected, if I have to go,
Mike,
shouldn't the county highway come right after that?
use your mic.
Where are we? Oh, okay. On the.
You see where I'm at? After the independent engineer selected, if applicable, rather than go to the preliminary plat reviews and have all this other stuff underneath that, county highway in between that and a preliminary plat review. Would it be beneficial to...
Well, they are part of the preliminary plat review. Everything that's under that, all those agencies under there, those 12, 13 agencies, they're all part, they all get to review the plat at the same time.
That would be beneficial.
We select
that in ahead of that.
Well, we select the independent engineer because he's part of the review process too, right. So we have to select him first.
Okay.
Okay.
My point is, go right from that to highway engineer and then to plat review. And that's part of that. I just wonder if it'd be beneficial for that.
Well, he reviews, they all have 45 days to review the plat. They all do it at the same time. It hasn't been a problem for us. That's currently what we do there, actually, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up on the comment that Ann made. As the trails go through, then let's say we set aside 5 acres for open space. The trails go through whatever the trails would comprise as far as acreage would come out of that designated 5.
Correct.
Is there any minimum that acreage that has to be established for children's playground, slides, so forth?
There are documents that specify minimum sizes for parks and playgrounds, but not our ordinance, no. In fact, we don't require that you build a playground. We just require that you give open space for a park or playground.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we go on?
We removed the stormwater control system section because the new stormwater ordinance replaces everything that was in that. We've added regulations to allow for conservation design subdivisions. They're allowed only in the rural estate district. They allow density bonuses as a reward for preserving more open space and following the conservation design principles. And that's pages 38 through 43. It's kind of extensive. I recommend that you guys read that and come back with some questions at a following meeting. So, allows for more lots than would normally be allowed if lots are clustered and design principles are met. So on a, let's say, 30-acre parcel, you could get 31-acre lots. If you cluster them all together and leave half the site as open space and parkland, we'll let you have, let's say, 35 lots instead of 30. So the developer gets more lots to sell, the county gets more open space and other benefits from it. In fact, there's even more if you include a lake or other amenities such as park equipment and gazebos and things like that, you may even get more bonus. So that one's a little complicated. Like I said, but we're not asking for approval today, we're just presenting this today, so I'd read that over and see if there's anything any questions you might have later on that. It does suspend the normal lot size and area width and setbacks that the zoning ordinance would allow for the rural estate district. 50% of the site must be left in open space. So out of that 30-acre site, 15 of it would have to be open space. Now currently, our open space part of the ordinance would probably only require maybe 3 acres of that. 4 acres of that would be open space. So the county would definitely get a benefit from that. Yeah, it is up to a 15% bonus for density, and which is 10% for conservation subdivision, 5% bonus for special amenities such as lakes or if you establish a wetland. There's a whole list of criteria in there that could be done. Gazebos, trails, fishing docks, wildlife habitat improvements, and we're using low-impact stormwater practices to give you an additional 5% bonus. And the open space for those must be dedicated to the public. And that brings us to the flow chart, which I believe everybody handed one out before the meeting. About the only real difference here, it appears to be a little more complicated. The part on the bottom is the new process. The one on the top is the old process. It's pretty much just clarified a lot better. The time frame isn't all that much longer. I believe there's an extra 45-day review period for the engineers in the final engineering stage, which our current system, even though it doesn't say that, once we get through the 45-day review period, the engineers still have to go back and make all the changes that were required from that review. So that's usually another 45 days anyway. So really, that time frame's there. It's just not specified in the current ordinance. Now it is. We've also added the independent engineer to this flow chart, and we've given ourselves a little more time for review by staff before it even goes to the 45-day review period. And I believe that's all I have. We've added, like I said, the as-built plan submittal, that's in there, when the impact fee is required. So, like I said, we're not asking for approval today. We're just presenting this to you so that you can review it and come back to us later on.
Any other questions of Ms. McBride?
Yeah, I have a question for my information. When you say allow for density, does that mean they allow to build the homes closer together?
It could be, yes.
Okay, if you're building the homes closer together, there's more people, more children. Do they take into consideration about the school?
What we really mean by density, though, is more lots. The houses could be built closer together, but that doesn't really necessarily mean that. By meaning more density, 30 acres you can get, let's say you could get 30 houses on it. If you do a conservation design, maybe you can get 35. So you're getting more houses, more lots, but those lots could be the same size as lots.
Are they factoring in that the people that have children and children have to have schools to go to, and is there enough school space for them?
The subdivision ordinance doesn't address schools.
No.
No, but depending on where it's located and whether the particular school districts have asked for an impact fee, the impact fee would be what addresses the school situation. I know Mantino, I believe, Bradley, Renee, Grand Park all have impact fees for their school districts. So that would be up to the corresponding school district for that area. George, did you have something? Or?
No, I was.
Okay. Just a quick one.
the flow chart can be sent to Jim Carsey,
Yes,
so he can, he has to,
yeah, County Highway has reviewed all of this.
just want to make sure they look at it again.
Yeah, in fact, they reviewed all of it before the land use committee actually got it, so.
Mr. Scholl?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add with respect to the schools, the superintendents in the past have been asked or allowed to put their input into evaluation of subdivision. That still stands, isn't it?
Yes, if you look on your...
So if they anticipate this is going to have a negative impact upon their schools, then they bear the responsibility of getting that letter of impact to the department.
Yeah, all school districts are part of the 45-day review period too. If you look at your flow chart on the preliminary plat submitted to, a local school district is on that list. So they get to comment, and they do. We get lots of comments from them, usually about turning around their school buses, but that's usually the big one.
Mr. Hess?
Thank you, Chair. Dell, would you explain this final plat as-built plans again?
Okay, the as-built plans. Many times, they submit plans to us telling us how they're going to construct it. Many times, it doesn't necessarily get constructed quite that way, and we want to see elevations and things like that of how it was actually constructed. So the as-built plans are, you've got the construction plans of what we want to do. Here's the as-built plans of what we actually did. It's going to have elevations, inlets for the storm sewer and things like that. If a pipe had to get moved a few feet over, it's going to show us that type of thing. Obviously, it won't be major any kind of major changes. They would have to come to us for approval first, but the as-built plans will tell us what's actually there and where it's at. It'll be really beneficial to our office for that.
Any other questions for now?
I have one question. How much time would you guys need to review this? Should I come back in a month?
20 years. 1 month. Spoken by 1 month.
Put it on the agenda for next month.
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yeah, I'll catch you later on.
Okay. Any other questions on this? All right, let's move on to greenways and trails.
I believe at one of the previous meetings, I had announced that we are applying to Illinois Department of Natural Resources for a grant to update our greenways and trails plan. We're asking for $10,000 from Department of Natural Resources, $2,500 from the MPO fund, planning fund grant, and $2,500 in-kind services from the planning department. And what we have today, applying for the MPO planning fund grant requires us to have a letter or a resolution of support for the project from the county board. So that's what we're asking for today.
I make that motion.
Second.
And there's a motion by Mr. Washington, seconded by Mr. Whitten to support the Greenways Trailways grant application. Any questions on that? Seeing none, let's have a roll call vote because that will deal with expenditures at some time.
Ms. Hertzberger?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Ms. McBride?
Aye.
Mr. Marcotte?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Tholen?
Aye.
Mr. Tripp?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Whitten?
Aye.
Mr. Cruz?
Motion carries. Next item is the appointment of a revolving loan fund committee member. With Mr. Martin going off the board a few years ago, we needed to make appointment to that committee. Mr. Vickery is on it right now, and I'm recommending that we put Ms. Jerry McBride on it. So I would look for a motion to move forward with that appointment made by Mr. Washington and seconded by Mr. Marcotte. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Reappointment of Terry Johnson to the Board Examiners and Appeals. You have his paperwork in your packet. I have a motion to reappoint him, made by Mr. Hess, seconded by Mr. Folin. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under old business, we were asked to put the TIF district enterprise zone on. Ms. Hertzberger, I don't know when that requested it, so I'm not sure really what you're looking for, but
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it was Stan James that requested this be on the agenda, and I brought it up at the county board meeting to remind us that it needed to be put on the agenda. We just wanted to discuss whether the enterprise zones were, there should be some taken off or removed from enterprise zones, some land, and just reevaluate how we're using them. So I think that's basically what we had in mind. So I don't know if we can discuss that now without a map and information and in old business. So I guess I'll request that it be put on the agenda for next meeting.
Mr. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason it was brought up is because it seems as though we've got some rules and regulations with this program that are supposed to be there. And I think it's time that we review exactly which ones we're planning on enforcing, period, quote, end of story. Because it seems as though that they go to like the communities first, and then by the time they get to us, we're the bad guys if we turn it down. And I think there's some misunderstanding in the process as to exactly what applies and what doesn't apply. And it appears as though there's a lot of property slipping through that's got no business being there in the first place. And we're using up this space. And we've got areas in this county and other places that are definitely distressed, that should be on the agenda, should be on the line of fire for this type of a program. I think we're burning a lot of this stuff up in areas that doesn't need to be used on. And that's my opinion on the thing, and that's the reason I wanted to have a review as to exactly what are the ground rules that says what qualifies. And we're going to agree on what qualifies. And then this way, if somebody's got an idea, they got a friend that wants to develop something, they're going to know up front, because going around to the local community, getting their approval, going to this person, then coming to us, making us look like the bad guys, I don't like that. So I think we ought to have a clear-cut understanding as to what's going to qualify when it gets here. So don't take a trail going that way if you got to use this trail to get to us. That's
Well,
the reason
eventually
for it.
it's got to be, somebody's going to be first and somebody's going to be last, because not all the board members or all the board meetings are on the same time. So, you know, and most of these are asked for by the community, so they're going to be the ones that initiate everything. So that's going to be the first place where it's going to go. So,
Well, I think we ought
that's
to.
just it. So, but it doesn't hurt to review it.
I think we ought to review it. I really do, because I mean, if it calls for a blighted area, that doggone it, it should be a blighted area.
Well, but there are different things in there that.
I know it, but I think we should have a
more than just
clarification.
a blighted area.
Yeah, so each and every one of us know exactly what we approve for this type of a program. But it seems as though it seems as though it's got about 15 different definitions in it. Depends who brings it in.
We'll have, we'll have a program. We can try and have planning put together a program, or an educational program.
Yeah, we had one in 2003.
Okay.
And I think we should have another one. I think we should review it. And I think we should decide exactly what we're going to accept and not accept out of the program. Thank you.
Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just spoke to Mr. McElroy from our office. I know that we've got some history on the application of both the enterprise zone and the TIF district. Our office will work on a memo to present first to this committee, and then I presume to the full board with the assistance of the planning department, so that at least with regard to the legal aspects, what the requirements are of this legislative body, you'll be able to discuss that with some full knowledge as to what the law is. So we'll make sure we have that by the time this gets back to the agenda.
Thank you. Ms. Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to concur with Karen and Stan. communities in this county have turned, let's wait for the sentence to rest. The communities in this county have turned this whole program on its head. It's just ridiculous because it's supposed to help blighted areas. Yet Pembroke is not part of an enterprise zone. I don't even think Sun River Terrace is. So number one, we need to look at the areas that really need it, such as Pembroke, as to what qualifies. Number two, the Census Bureau. You can go into the Census Bureau website and you can get information almost literally down to the block. And I think we need to look at including census tract information before deciding whether a specific development qualifies for an enterprise zone break. Because there's no reason to keep, we're watching this giveaway in Bradley going on and on and on. And because we're last in line, it's almost like there's, I don't want to say direct, but there's like almost an indirect coercion there. Well, everybody else approved it, let's go along with it. That's wrong. And you know what's been going on in Bradley with Gail Kent, he is creating blight because those empty storefronts are all the way up to Arbor Road now. Because he keeps doing this leapfrogging sprawl and he's taking farmland out of development. So I think as part of this review, I think we need to look at what we can do to tighten our regulations to include census tract information. So everybody can look at this with open eyes and say, well, why are we giving enterprise zone tax breaks to an area where there's $250,000 homes according to the census tract? I think we need to include that more information, and I think we need to tighten what we're doing because I don't care what they say, the enterprise zone, I really think that we're making a mockery of it, we're abusing it.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. I appreciate the offer by the state's attorney in having a legal definition of the enterprise zones and how it has been applied in the past. But I think we need to go one step beyond just a memo. I think a presentation to the committee would be very valuable. Thank you.
I think that's what he was looking at, was he'll do it, come back to him, and then be a part of the presentation. So, any other questions? Mr. McLaren.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think the main question that might be coming out of this, we know that there's criterions that go for the enterprise zone. Question, I guess, I think this committee needs to know, do all criterions have to be met? Do some of them, do the majority of them? Because I understand the members' concerns about the blighted areas, but does every criterion have to be met that's on there? And is it a majority of them? I mean, let's take a realistic look at it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. We'll try and get something together. Okay. Next was a delegation agreement. Again, I'm not sure who wanted that on, but Ms. Richard.
That was me. The delegation agreement, we wanted an update to see what was going on with it, and just to see how we're moving forward on that. So if someone, Jamie or someone could give us an update on that for the record.
Here's what I know, because we've talked to the state. They received the 6 items that we asked to have included in the delegation agreement. But we're not sure who's reviewing it or where that process is with the state. We're going to contact them again. We're going to try and follow through with them again. We will probably draft our own delegation agreement, maybe with that in there, to send down there to see if they approve that. So we're not sure. But they do have the application for the solid waste enforcement grant. They are reviewing that. We should have an answer within the next few weeks, hopefully, on that. It's being reviewed by Springfield, and then from there it's got to go to the higher ups for that part of it. So, as we understand, or as I understand, what's missing on that, or what's being changed on that, there are a few changes. Some of the sites that were active previously are now not active. So we don't have to do as many inspections on those, so they're going to drop the number of inspections on that. One other thing that was included though in that was, should Town and Country continue to move forward, then we have to start inspecting that site. So we put a number of inspections for that, should that move forward before the next application is due. So, telling you what I know. So, Mr. Wood, okay. Mr. Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the concern is that there are groups within the county that are going to constantly push the envelope in what they can do and what they should be doing according to the charter. There is a problem of runoff, there's a problem of contamination, there's a problem of stench. Is there something in the interim, while this process is being worked out by through the structure within Springfield, is there something in the interim that the county can do to ensure that the aggressively ensure that the inhabitants of the county are not being victimized by continual abuse of non-enforcement of regulations? Is there anything in the works that we can do to ensure that we can do this? Well, health department, I know the responsibility falls there, but they don't have the manpower, they don't have the resources to do this. So either we're going to have to come up with some increased resources for them to do it, or find another avenue to make sure that this is done. And that's what concerns me. I mean, the problem hasn't gone away, and there's abuse of the structure.
Okay. Mr. F.
Thank you. You mentioned town and country. Would we be better off to just say any new development instead of a specific, you know, a name or something like that in there? Or a new, well, you don't know that right now.
Any site that would go through would have to go through a permitting application, which the state would know that, and then they would notify us. So any...
Even a composting site?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So like the Van Drunen farms, the Joyce farms, those all go through a permitting process. So we would be aware of that, but then those would be included in. But we are aware of town and country, so that's why that was included in specifically. Mr. Boyd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, and I know this thing isn't working, I'll stand here anyway. I guess it's important that the committee understand that we're talking about the enforcement of a state law with the IEPA. With everything else that is going on in Springfield with the IEPA and everybody's budget, we've also recently been notified by the department or by the agency that there is a shift in who is going to be, for lack of a better phrase, handling Kankakee County from the IEPA standpoint. That may be, I don't know it to be, but that may be part of the reason why they've been slow to respond to what we've sent to them. I anticipate that sometime in the next 30 days, if we have to, we're going to either talk to the old person or the new person, or if we have to talk to somebody else in Springfield and find out what's your position on this. I mean, I understand we'd like to get something done. The problem is when you deal with the state of Illinois, you're dealing with the state of Illinois, and they don't act quickly. And you know, as I'm sure everybody heard the governor say yesterday, he has no intention of signing the current budget because there's such a deficit. So we can only move so fast on our end, and at the same time, we've sent them what we thought was appropriate, and I believe that was in February. We'll see what we hear from them. If you've got other suggestions, because I'm not a regular participant in dealings with the IEPA, but if you have other suggestions or avenues that we could go down to get action out of the IEPA, I'm more than willing to listen and give them all a shot. So otherwise I go by the channels that we're supposed to go by, but if you've got other ideas, let me know. More than happy to go talk to whoever needs to be talked to, bring a group, bring a committee, go by myself, whatever it takes. So.
Questions? Ms. Bernard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points here. I called the EPA and spoke with them this morning, and a couple of things first. I think we need to stop this teeth gnashing and this hand wringing about what can we do because people are pushing the envelope, there's this abuse going on, or the governor and the state are dragging their feet out. Let's put the blame right where it belongs, and that's in this room. We wouldn't be having any of this discussion had this board not voted to suspend the delegation agreement 16 months ago. This is a self-created mess that we've done, and to try to pass it off on the IEPA right now, or the governor, or whoever you want to pass it off on, it's totally disingenuous. The fact is this board a majority of this board willingly voted to rescind the delegation agreement to strip the people of this county of the protection and the inspections they had. And now to try to pass the buck, first of all, let's get that straight. It is wrong, number one. Number two, what's the problem, what's the delay? Well, we passed this resolution back in February, and when it was sent to IEPA, it was not even signed. So it's not an official resolution. So again, let's look in the mirror. You know, like Poco says, we have met the enemy and it is us. Anyhow, number three, these are some of the things we're going to have problems with, which the IEPA has expressed already. They have problems with our demand for indemnification. That's not done anywhere else, okay? But we want to be different. But this is one place we want to be a leader. They have a problem with having a reluctance or refusal or reluctance to investigate permitted sites, okay? They're paying us to go out there and do this. That's the point of the delegation agreement. Number three, they have a problem with us giving advance notice to these people, okay? Oh, hi, we're going to come and visit, and please clean your mess up. We're going to be there, i.e., you know? So for us to sit here and blame the governor and blame the IPA and blame the state, no, it's all in this room. This is where it began. We should have never suspended the agreement because now we're doing all this teeth gnashing and hand wringing, trying to act like, oh, what are we going to do to help the public? It started right here, folks. You want to resolve this problem? Reinstate the delegation agreement. Reinstate it. It's a no-brainer.
Mr. James?
Everybody's here to get up this. Thank you. I want to make one thing clear. We had no business, in my opinion, getting involved in a delegation agreement in the first place. If it's licensed and it's supposed to be inspected by the state, that's their job, that's their responsibility. I have difficulty understanding why we want to be part of it in any way, shape, or form, so that at any time, if something really serious come up, the claim of collusion could come into play and make us very well embarrassed and egg on our face. Now, if we've got our own inspection program, which we do, we have a health department. Now, either it's passing the health department or it's passing the zoning. If it is, then that's where it's at. If there's stronger regulations need to be enforced and they're put in place by the state, as far as I'm concerned, it's the state's full responsibility to enforce them. I don't want no part of covering their butt. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wynn?
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Stan 100%. This all belongs to the health department. It was given to the health department to begin with, and that's where it should be.
Okay. Mr. Schroll?
Thank you. I quite frankly, I don't give a hoot and holler who's responsible for what. The problem is here. We've got a problem in our county. It's our problem to deal with. And we've moved this over to the health department. If it's going to be in the health department, we need more funding, more personnel, whatever is needed over there to ensure that the water quality throughout the county is healthy, is safe. And to deal with those on a county level. I'm not talking about the state. I mean, you can argue with Springfield till the, Hades freezes over, whatever. I mean, it's irritating, but it is our problem. If they don't do it, we have to. And we have to ensure that the people in the county have safe drinking waters, especially those who are on wells throughout the county. This is a major issue. And also the stench has to be dealt with. And so we moved it to the health department. Let's move this to finance, find some funds, whatever, or personnel to deal with the problem on a county level. Can we do all of it? No, but at least we can, make an effort in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Bob that we can't go back. We have to move forward. And I also agree with Ann that we probably should reinstate the delegation agreement the way it was written in the first place. The changes we made, I thought they were a good idea, but if the state is not going to go along with it, I think we can do without those changes. And we should have a sense of urgency about this issue. And it seems like it's just another political football being kicked back and forth all over the place. And this is an important issue for our county and for people, everyday life, and their quality of life in this county. And that we can't forget that. So we should be really trying to get this done and really trying to make sure that people have clean drinking water, and they don't have to sit out on their porch and smell stench. And what kind of quality of life is that for people in Kankakee County? I mean, we should want a better standard for the people who live here, so we should move forward with this as best we can and get it done quickly.
Ms. Bernard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I would suggest, even though I'm not on this committee, so I cannot make a motion or vote, what I would suggest you put this back on the agenda, that you reinstate, a motion to reinstate the delegation agreement without these onerous provisions that are just going to run into resistance from the state. That's the first thing I'd recommend. A couple of, so I think that would go a long way, because the number of inspections has decreased dramatically. And I hear people saying, well, it's the state's responsibility. It's the state's responsibility. Well, we play a role in it when we give the zoning approval for these sites. We do have a role in it, and the bottom line, like Bob has said, it's in our county, it's in our community. So we do, yes, we do have a role in this, and we have a responsibility. We have an obligation to protect the health and safety and welfare of the people of this county. And I would be very cautious about putting this back in the health department, for the simple fact that we nearly lost the monies from the delegation agreement because the health department was not doing its job with inspections. There's a letter from the state, many of you have probably already seen it, that said if you don't get this cleaned up, and I'm paraphrasing here, but if you don't get this cleaned up, you lose the money. And the county did the good thing. They moved it over to the planning. They created a separate, in the solid waste department of planning. They hired a very competent inspector. We were bringing in revenue. We were getting inspections done. Polluters were being held accountable. But I really think, I mean, the solution to this is so much simpler than we all want to admit. Let's put it on the next PCA agenda. Let's reinstate the delegation agreement. The state's fiscal year begins July 1st. But let's get moving on it, because it's people's health at stake. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Vickery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not a member of the committee, but I'd like to put forth my thoughts on this thing. I'd like to see us move forward with this delegation agreement. I go back to the days where we had the tire fires in Hopkins, the Cross Brothers with their barrels and barrels of paint and stuff out of the city. And I'm afraid we'll go back to that. Our rural areas are going to become dumping grounds. This stuff's very expensive to get rid of, and I think without a delegation agreement that Kankakee County could become a dumping ground for many of the manufacturing entities from our surrounding neighbors. So I'd like to see us move forward on this. I spent some time in that one meeting in our subcommittee explaining, and we had Mr. Beavis in, and we've got people today that are violating all the regulations. And I know a couple of the mayors are not happy about a delegation agreement, but as a county, we've got to do our job. So I'd like to see us get this on the agenda and get it moving. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other old business? Any new business?